The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. This is Bryan for Breaking Down Security. This is part 2 of our interview with Phil Beyer. We're going to finish talking our book club or our book lists that we've been reading on the last month or two. So you're gonna hear some two more books, and then we're gonna get into how somebody who's in leadership makes an impact. As soon as, the idea is, well, I just want to hit the ground running, when in fact, maybe you don't want to necessarily try to make changes within the first, I'd say 90 days or so. When you get up to the level of CISO or CSO or, senior managers, you don't want to come in with a bunch of ideas that, don't necessarily make a lot of sense. I've seen this in multiple ways with multiple people. So what you're going to hear is some of the techniques that Phil Beyer uses, who's now the CISO of Etsy. And, then we talk about a panel discussion from B-Sides Edmonton that I had attended, where we talk about impact and culture change in terms of working remotely. One of the people who was on the panel for B-Sides Edmonton worked for the Canadian government in an organization that went from everybody in a nondescript office building, file servers and mop bucket closets, and all the way to needing laptops, remote working, VPN, using personal devices for work because they didn't have anything else. So we're going to talk about some of the culture shift there and some of the volatility involved with that. Very entertaining discussion, and I hope you get a lot out of it. We always love having Phil on, and we appreciate your feedback. So send us an email over, send us an email or something over Twitter or our Slack. We enjoy the feedback. We enjoy the discussion. So hope you have a great rest of your week. I did the organizational change management class to become a change management professional, not because I wanted it for work, was because my wife took it and she was like, yeah, this was a really great, class. You're going to learn a lot. And I did. Actually, the ADKAR book that we're actually doing for our book club right now on Brakesec talks about how to implement organizational change management. And the most I got out of it was that I don't have the power that I thought I did, which is why a lot of the things that I try to do in my organization fail because I didn't have an effective sponsor. I didn't communicate those changes correctly. And, as somebody who's moving more into project management and trying to be a manager, a good manager, I realized the limitations of my own power, such as it is. And, affecting change at an organizational level, you can't take all that on yourself. You actually have to let people in, people who are above you potentially, who can help make those changes possible. So that was one that worked for me. And the other ebook I read, I was listening to was The Effective Manager by Mark Horseman, again, from Manager Tools, to help you understand how to be a better manager. I also have Seat at the Table, which I haven't finished reading yet. I'm going to try to get to that one as soon as I can, talking about how, you can get a seat at that executive table. I think it's written for the new CISO out there. Because ultimately, everybody wants to be in charge, but I think it depends on how you get in charge is what frames your managerial acumen in this case. So
now, if you don't mind, I'll riff off that a little bit. But Bryan, were you going to say something before?
Well, I just wanted to say that if people are turned off by us talking about management books and all management podcasts and stuff, you don't have to have the ambition to become a manager or want to be a manager to have really good value out of these manager tools type things. They really teach you a lot more than just how do you become a manager, that type of thing.
Yeah, I would argue it teaches you how the sausage is made, or maybe the motivations, or the objectives of your senior leadership. I call the ADKAR book, you're learning how to hack your organization, because I I'm an IT person and I want this done. And it's like, well, why doesn't anybody listen to me? It's because there's communications, there's stakeholders you haven't engaged, there's plans you haven't created. You maybe haven't explained it well enough to somebody who might be in charge to be able to make that change. And they're just as, I don't want to use the word impotent, but they're just as powerless as you are in the organization, or they, we've tried this 500 times. I think the monkey experiment example has happened. They put a bunch of monkeys in a cage. One goes up and tries to grab a banana. He gets a shock. All of them try for the banana. They all get a shock. And eventually there's a culture where it's like, I don't want to go for that banana. And then they bring in a new monkey and the monkey goes for the banana, not knowing. And all the other monkeys beat the hell out of him because they know he's going to get shocked. So they want to protect him. So they protect him by beating the hell out of him. So, I think that there's, some people are like, I don't want to be a manager. Well, you don't have to be. You just have to understand the motivations of the people above you. Yeah. And those books help.
And I would underscore that, that point, or that I think it's salient for the conversation, that it doesn't just make you more effective as an employee to understand what effective management looks like. I suppose it's worth inserting the corollary that it's also tempting, right? It's now a little bit more tempting for you to perhaps try to manage up, which I would caution against. It's a very dangerous tactic, perilous, or it is tempting then to provide feedback to your manager, which is also a dangerous. Those waters are very dangerous. So be cautious. But those are the negative versions of it. The positive version of it is the phrase I was thinking about was that, do you want, or the question rather to oneself is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And oftentimes we, as to some extent, I'm looking at myself as much as I'm looking at anybody else here, that kind of desire or that temptation to be self-righteous and say, look, I know what's right here. I know how to solve this problem. I know how to get us out of this conundrum. That's not necessarily a bad sentiment, but there are other perspectives, and very rarely do we find ourselves these days in a situation where there is an ultimate answer and only one right answer or something like that. Very often there are multiple ways or multiple paths up the mountain, and we can get to the top in a variety of ways, as long as we're doing it together. And so if you want to reach the top, then figure out the best way to get to the top, not the way that you want to get to the top, to use just a very kind of crude way of talking about it. A couple other salient points. I think the change management concept is a powerful one for security folks in general. I've thought this for a number of years now, since I learned a little bit more, not as much as you, I think, Bryan, but I learned a little bit more about change management overall myself, and realized, oh, wow, this is a discipline and a practice that I know very little about, really. Like, I thought I knew something, but now the more I learn, the more I realize I knew nothing about all this in terms of being good at it, right? Again, being effective, making sure that we get the right things done. I should briefly explain that word. Effectiveness people confuse with efficiency, and those are very different words. Efficiency is doing things the right way, but effectiveness is doing the right things in the first place. So to make sure we spend our time in the way that is most effective means to do the things that are going to have the most positive effect. Anyway, to be effective, it's much more about how do we work with people, how do we communicate across the organization, and a lot of the other things that you mentioned. And then in security, we often find ourselves in that position, right? We want to affect change in security because usually we're not employed unless there is some sort of security deficiency. I'm not aware of many companies that don't have some sort of security deficiency that needs to be changed or improved. Right. I want to say one more thing too, in terms of some of the stuff we were talking about. I was reminded or thought of, I mentioned atomic habits earlier, and I was thinking about this earlier for the context of this group. We're all podcast listeners, myself included, as you guys have called out. And I realized that I had done something intuitively that I was just reading about in Atomic Habits this morning. So there's a phrase he uses that James Clear uses called temptation bundling. He also introduces a phrase earlier in the book called habit stacking, which is a version of BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits recipe. And putting those two together, let me give you a practical kind of thing you can do, either on your walks or runs, Bryan. But it's something that I've intuitively done, and perhaps it's something that you intuitively do as well, or some of the listeners do. And that is, look, I know I need to do something, right? Whatever this thing is. Maybe it's 5 push-ups, or express gratitude to my spouse, or listen to Planet Money or something. I don't know, like whatever it is, right? What is that key thing that you need to do? And you can bundle it. This is where the temptation bundling concept comes in. You can bundle it with the thing that you want to do. So maybe the thing you want to do is listen to Brakesec, right? You want to listen to the next episode. It just dropped, and you're ready to go. The interview with Katie Masuris, I'm so excited to listen to it. It's all queued up and ready. Well, I'm itching to listen to that. So right before, maybe as I either begin my walk or my run, I hit the ground and I do 10 sit-ups first, or right before I go, or maybe I queue up the thing that I know it's good for me to listen to, Seth Godin's Akimbo podcast, or Masters of Scale, or something like that. I don't love those episodes, or I don't love this historical reference podcast, or something that I don't know. I don't have good examples, because all the podcasts I listen to, I love listening to. So I'm a bad person here, but perhaps that you need to listen to something, or you need to do something ahead of time. So you bundle it with the thing that you want to do. You bundle it with your walk, or you bundle it with listening to Brakesec, and that is a practical way of building a system of habits around the things you're already doing that are habitual. So another common one that's eminently practical that you probably do without realizing is flossing with brushing your teeth. And so maybe you like one or the other, right? I don't know which one you listener like or prefer, but probably you do the one that you prefer with the one that you don't prefer. And if you're like me, it's flossing. And so that I don't like, or I don't prefer. And so what I should be doing is flossing first and then brushing second, because I want to brush my teeth. I love that feeling after I'm done. I just need to stack or bundle a few things before that, so that I get those things done first, and then I get to the thing that I like, which is that fresh, minty feeling after a toothbrush. So,
fantastic. And then you go down and have orange juice, and it's just really nasty. Oh my God! Even tomatoes or anything acidic is just blah.
That's why you eat dessert last, right? Wait, Phil. You eat dessert first. I know.
Yeah, I break my own advice all over the place. I am a study in contradictions, friends.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. So, we're gonna have a ton of links in the show notes. One of the things. So you said earlier you were 9 weeks and change as of 2 October here, into being the CISO over at Etsy. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that the interview process wasn't just like a couple interviews and you're in, because of the extreme high visibility. Yep. It's not a small organization anymore. It's not a mom and pop shop. It's fairly well known. You got advertisements on TV. I was like, oh, I know somebody who works there. I'm assuming they came up with something like, what's your 30, 60, 90-day plan, or you may have supplied something like that to them. When people are interviewing, and we've already talked about interviewing a little bit, when somebody asks you about your 30, 60, 90-day plan, what is it that you like to tell them in that respect? Is it always the same, or I mean, obviously how do you tailor it to maybe what you're expecting from that organization? Do you do OSINT? I mean, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So it's a good one. Again, both practical and a little bit more strategic. We could kind of go both granular as well as bigger picture.
Sure.
So the short answer is my approach has changed over time, and so I'll say that perhaps earlier on in my career, I thought it much more important than I do right now to make an impact, just air quotes here for those people listening, in the first 100 days or the first 90 days or something. And the learning after talking to peers and after talking to, more importantly, executives who employ CISOs, right? So CEOs or COOs or CIOs or CTOs, is no, they're not generally looking for impact in the first 100 days, mostly because you don't know anything about the organization. So the quote unquote impact that you want to make could be a completely wrong thing for the organization, because it may have been fantastic for your previous organization. And I suppose there's a remote chance that the thing that you hit on or the thing that you learn from the outside looking in is the thing that this organization needs. But probably for those of us, and maybe you're, the exception to the rule, whoever you are that think you have that. But for the rest of us, mere mortals here, like me, it is much better and much more effective to learn as much about the organization as possible in the first 90 days. So I'll break that down with 3 chunks: 30, 60, and 90. So 0 to 30, and 31 to 60, and 61 to 90. But recall that, something that you probably learned in kindergarten, like I did, that the way to learn is mostly to listen, and not really to talk, which I'm doing a ton of. And so in this interview, the point is that that learning process is mostly about listening. And so my objective over the past, I guess it's been, so last week was my 60-day. September 25th was my day 60. So where I'm in 60 something, 67 or 68 or whatever today. And I am counting. If that wasn't obvious, I have it in my calendar, and it's clear to me what the calendar days are since the day that I started. But the objective is to mostly ask questions and meet with folks, both in groups and one-on-ones, to understand as many things as possible as quickly as possible. So this is an efficiency deal, right? So I already know what the effective thing to do is. The effective thing to do is learn. And the efficiency question is, well, what is the most efficient way to do that? And sometimes it can be, it's harder virtually, right? It's this is Captain Obvious here, but it's harder being away from the office. And not being able to run into people organically or listen in on conversations, respectfully and professionally, of course, but listen in on conversations that are appropriate for me to listen in on, or overhear things that are appropriate for me to overhear. That's much, much harder. So what I have to do is identify those key stakeholders and those folks that really make sense for me to spend extended time with, mostly where I prompt them with things or suggest stuff that may be provocative, that then can have a response that is a productive conversation from that point. And I won't purport to be an expert conversationalist in that regard. I'm adequate. I'm in the middle somewhere probably, but mostly I know that I have tons of thoughts and tons of ideas that need to be bounced off of, quite literally to some extent, bounced off of a variety of team members and a variety of peers and stakeholders who can tell me whether those things make sense at Etsy or whether those things don't make sense at Etsy. And I'm really glad that I didn't come in with some sort of agenda preset, because I had some idea of what was going to go on or what is going on within Etsy. But I again, probably obvious here, but I definitely did not know the full extent of what's happening. That's not a bad statement or a good statement. It's just different, right? There's just a whole lot of stuff that there was no way for me to learn, OSINT wise or other. I did do my research. I did do a lot of looking around and listening to things that were out there, previous interviews with leaders like our CTO, even some massive changes that's happened in Etsy over the last few years with different leadership changes and somewhat controversial things, as well as other stuff. Some folks will recognize Etsy as one of the early on companies making waves in DevOps, in the DevOps world. And so Etsy was always something of it was always on my radar screen to some extent. And so I knew some stuff going from the outside coming in, but learning what I've learned, it would have been a monumental career mistake to have come in with a set agenda. I'm very thankful that my boss, my manager, has he was confident in making that pretty clear at the outset. He encouraged me. Again, thankfully, he and I were well aligned in this regard. It would have been harder if we weren't aligned, but I'm glad that we were, in the sense that for the first 90-ish days or so, the objective is to learn as much as possible and to not make changes. The actual directive from him was, do not make any major changes. And again, thankfully, I was fully on board. Now, I promised some practical layouts, and I'll say that for the most part, this comes from a version or from some manager tools guidance, which is exactly like, what should you do in your first 90 days as a manager? Go figure. But that's actually a podcast. So look for that one if you want a version of what I'm about to tell you. In the first 30 days for me, that process was very organic, meaning who reached out to me, who was I directed to reach out to, and who made sense for me to meet with. So that was mostly within the security organization. So who are my team members? I need to get to know them and start to build relationships via one-on-one meetings. What are our existing team meetings, and how can I kind of insert myself into that dialogue and that process that's already happening? And then also, how can I build my relationship with my manager going forward so that I have a strong foundation and base of someone who already understands the organization, who can then guide me. So that's kind of the first few weeks. I'll when we're done, I will interject why that was a particularly volatile time for me. But I'll get to that later. The second set of 4 weeks, the 61 to 90, or rather 31 to 60, that is, I didn't completely hit my objective. My objective in the first 60 days was to have conducted a capability assessment. So what I've told people, or what I did tell people, and I have told people, is that the first 30 days is more organic. So who comes to me, who makes sense for me to reach out to just learn within the context of conversation and meetings. The second set of 30 days is more along the lines of making sure that I didn't miss anything. So one of the ways to do that is to do a risk assessment. One of the ways to do that is to bring in a third-party kind of pen tester or something like that, right? There are ways to do this. This is not the way I'm about to describe is not the only way to do it. But how you make sure you systematically cover the breadth and depth of your responsibility, that's going to be up to you and or your organization. For me at Etsy, it made sense to conduct what is sometimes called a program capability assessment, meaning what are we capable of doing and how mature are we in those capabilities. So you can think of it like a CMMI rating, right? A 0 to 5 or a 1 to 5 of ad hoc, and then reactive, and then proactive, or repeatable, and then repeatable, and then whatever, right? It doesn't matter what the labels for the numbers are, even though I can't consistently repeat them anytime. But the concept is that we have a level of maturity that we're looking for in each of the sets of capabilities across our program. Are we at our desired level of capability, maturity, or are we behind, or are we ahead even? So doing that capability assessment with something of either a framework, which could be akin to an ISO or NIST or COBIT style framework, though those are probably a little bit inadequate for what I'm describing, but they're at least a step in the right direction if you don't have anything else. There are also some tools or some services out there that will help you and your team do this. One of the reasons why this approach was appealing to me is because, again, one, there are tools out there that will help me now that have been developed over the last few years by folks that I'm familiar with and know, and I've already met and was already aware of. This is not I didn't have to go out and look for something. I knew something existed already. And then the other appealing thing here is we get to do it ourselves. So as much as in some situations it's advantageous to bring in a third party to conduct that maturity assessment or perspective, and a whole host of third parties are chomping at the bit to come in and do that for you, the thing that was appealing to me and that was appealing to my peers at Etsy was for us to do it ourselves. And that is something of a cultural philosophy to some extent. I'm really kind of inadequately communicating it, but the Etsy kind of craftsmanship style philosophy is to make sure that we're good that we hone our craft and that we get good at what we do. And so understanding what we do is not too far off the mark of an approach that would resonate with my peers. And in fact, it is resonating with folks so far. So I'm a little bit behind. I wanted to have that done in the first 60 days, and we're kind of just getting in the middle of that now. We're right on the edge of that. And then the final thing, or final grouping in the last the final 30 days or so, is to chart a path forward. So this is common between multiple different approaches to the first 100 days, the first 90 days. Somewhat those are interchangeable, which is odd since there's a whole week and a half that's different between 90 days and 100. But for a lot of those kinds of plans, they encourage having by the end of it something of a chart, of a roadmap or a strategic chart course charted by the time you're done, so that you have an idea of where you're headed there. And I'm in agreement that by that time, by 90 days or so, you have a general idea of what needs to happen, especially if you've done your due diligence and your homework while you've been in the organization for the first few weeks. And so expecting that at the end of 90 days or 100 days, I think is reasonable still. So that's something of what I would encourage, the process that people use. There are much more formal ways that people talk about this. One book I can recommend is The New Leader's 100-Day Action Plan. I've read it before. I don't necessarily subscribe to everything anymore. That was one of the books I read early on to try to understand this concept. And George Brad and the authors make some excellent points, and they advise folks, CEOs, doing this kind of thing all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they're wrong, as much as I think that for a manager or a mid-level leader, even a CISO, that guidance should be taken perhaps dialed down a little bit in the way that I just described.
Okay. Very cool. That's excellent. I can definitely understand, there's jokes about people just coming in and being the seagull manager, coming in, squawking, making a lot of noise, shitting on things, minus the leaving part. But I definitely can see the value in learning and observing. You don't want to, make anybody angry. And while you're in your first 90 to 100 days, you're trying to build rapport with your new directs. You're trying to, gauge the people that you might, I'm just assuming here, but I would imagine that you're trying to gauge who might be, places of resistance when you're trying to get changes put through. It's like, oh, well, the CFO obviously is going to be, resistant to things that don't affect, that affect the company as a whole. So I'm going to have to, tailor my, proposals to make sure that, they're okay with that. Or, the CIO, she's got a specific agenda, which may or may not clash with mine. So I need to make sure that, her goals and my goals are kind of aligned. And, my directs or my, the people under my directs, have, here's their pain points. So my job is to try to help, bridge the gap between the C folks and, the technical folks to help everybody, get better. You mentioned some volatility. It was the volatility because of the pandemic and going full remote, or I went to B-Sides Edmonton, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. It's now probably a couple weeks ago by the time this aired. But there was a government agency there that was, the pandemic hit them super hard because they did not have a work from home policy. They did not have work from home technology. They didn't have laptops for people. And they were like, yeah, overnight, we're not at work. Nothing's happening. So we had to roll out an entire infrastructure, an entire, and this was Canadian government. But I mean, in the last few years, U.S. government's actually moved to a more remote kind of thing anyway. But yeah, so it was interesting to hear how she had to roll this out and get this working so that everybody could get back to some kind of normalcy, even like Zooms and stuff. They didn't do Zooms. Everybody was in the same building. So everybody went to meetings, and, it was a huge culture change for them. So what was the volatility that you found when you were starting work there?
Yeah, so no one listening can see the smirk on my face, and maybe you can hear it now, but it's completely different. Has nothing to do with anything you just said, Brian,
Oh, good.
or anything Etsy related or anything. And
Sweet.
it's the best kind of volatility, which
Right.
I'll explain. So this is the reason why I know exactly that it's been 9 weeks, and yeah, I know it's 9 weeks and something days. I guess it's 9 weeks and 9 weeks and 6 days. No, sorry, 9 weeks and 3 days, because I'm trying to do weekly math in my head, which doesn't work. This is why I know, because my daughter is 10 weeks old tomorrow.
Oh my.
Yes. So
Yes.
the best kind of
Congratulations.
volatility is also the most disruptive kind, and that is related to sleep and rest and this and that. And so,
Right.
yes, if you work backwards here, our daughter was born, our most recent child, because we have other children as well in the house, and so our daughter was born the Saturday before I started Etsy, and I started Etsy on a Tuesday. So,
Goodness.
yeah, it has been a very exciting, a very exciting 9 weeks, 10 weeks tomorrow. So there are other things there that are a personal nature, but the takeaway for the crowd, I don't know if there is really a takeaway for the crowd. I don't know, but that's what has made it both a struggle, again,
Right.
hard to try to balance family and spending the right amount of time, which is, always hard to do, no matter who you are and how young
Right.
or old or whatever your family is. And knowing whether you've made the right decision. I wonder about that on a regular basis, whether I've made the right decision, because you haven't heard from me that I took, 2 weeks off or 3 weeks off or 4 weeks off. I ended up taking about a week and a half off. I started at Etsy and spent a couple days with my colleagues remotely, and then I took a week and a half off, and then came back. And that still is a very challenging decision. I'm not exactly sure whether I would make that decision the same way, where I'd have it to do over again.
Right.
I'm proud of the decisions I make, and I'm happy to stand by them. But yeah, that was a tough one.
Right.
And I don't necessarily think that there is a right answer there. I'm very thankful that Etsy as a company has a very generous parental leave policy that applies to both spouses or both folks involved there, and so I'm thankful that we have that. As a leader, the factor in the decision that was also important for me, though, was to be there for my new team and to get to know my new team. And so that's why that first 30 days was a difficult road to hoe in terms of what do I do here and how do I do this? How do I both represent and prove to folks that I believe that family is important, because I do, but it's always actions that speak louder than words. So if my action is I'm going to take a week and a half off as opposed to 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, well, that says something to my team. And so I had to balance that with also the desire to get to know this new company that I've just started working with. So
Right.
yeah.
I would imagine there's quite a bit of nuance there, and I've always been one to believe that there is a work-life balance. A lot of people, because they're working at home, there's some companies out there that think, well, they're at home, so they should be able to work 70, 80 hours a week or whatever, which is leading to burnout. At least with some people, if you follow Twitter at all. But are there changes for you, moving to this job, that did you set boundaries when you came in? Did you say, hey, look, I don't mind working a 60-hour week once in a while, but I'm here from 8 Central to 5:30 Central, and I've got a new baby, I've got family, I've got kids. I am unavailable on a weekend, or I expect to be able to go on vacation and not get pinged. What kind of boundaries did you set? And I'm just talking Not as a CISO, but I mean overall,
Yeah.
what kind of boundaries should people expect to be able to set?
Yeah, I think it's very appropriate to set explicit boundaries, just to reinforce what you're saying. Um, I'm grateful that Etsy as a company, and it's probably largely due both to the success of Etsy in the last few months, but also just the underlying culture that's been in the company for a long time. There is a generally respectful attitude towards early hours and or late hours. So I just in general, the company, I think, has a very healthy approach and philosophy to that. With that said, the corollary is I have a tendency and a desire to do effective work and strong work. So whether that plays out as longer hours some weeks, that's a struggle that I have professionally and personally that probably each of us has to deal with on some level. If you're excited about something, you kind of want to do that work, and there's nothing wrong with that. The most effective answer I have to your question has to do largely with the system I've set up within our family structure over the past many years. So it's definitely not a overnight thing, and I would not tell anybody, I would not lie in that way. It is not something that I think can be done overnight. But we have set up, my wife and I and our kids together really have set up a relatively routine day, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've thrived in the pandemic as much as we can. Thrive is a really weird word to use, but we've succeeded, I think, in being not kill each other at home kind of family over the last many months, because we have a relatively routine approach to every day, Saturday and Sunday included, and the work day is a different day than Saturday, is a different day than Sunday, but they still have the same kind of feel to them. In terms of when we get up and what we do, and when we take time out together to eat, and when we take time out together to relax, and when we go our separate ways, individually even, and then when we come together. So all that kind of rhythm and routine really helps, really helps. I feel like I'm being a broken record in the sense of like we're going even back to the systems concept of habits and routines and things but the reason is because that stuff is powerful. It's super, super powerful. Even now, certainly in a new employer, like I've joined a new company, that can absolutely disrupt it, and has disrupted my routines. A new baby is the perfect disruptor of routines, the most efficient disruptor of routines ever invented in the history of humanity. But ultimately, what we can do, we as people can settle back into those routines that are either healthy for us, or if we're not careful, that are unhealthy for us. And that's where I think I believe in the concept of balance. I want to interject here that there is no comparison between family and work. Family is way, way, way more important than work. The way that plays out day to day, though, because of sustenance and salary and bringing home the bread, if you will, or bacon, or whatever the right term is, it is a weird one to try to work out. And the way that we have worked it out, which is successful and helpful for us, is with a really strong routine and rhythm to every day. So.
That's very nice. Yeah. And the more we grow as our family, and I'm sure you see the same thing, is you're bringing some of your process improvement, deals at work to your family, or vice versa. What worked here, because you may not be a manager at home, but you are a manager at home, whether it be a manager of your children, or of a budget, or what have you, and you can take that back to work and go, well, okay, I've got 5 kids, I've got 5 reports. They're not my children at work, but a lot of it translates in some ways. So process improvement at work, you've got process improvement at home. You definitely can bring home some of that manager stuff to home, and take some of the the dad stuff or partner stuff back to work. So having a routine and even works at work. If you've got regular meetings or, if you decide, well, because of this pandemic, we can't all get together. So like last night, we had a happy hour for our organization. So all the PMs got together and we had a virtual happy hour where we're, not talking about work. We're talking about something completely different to kind of build that rapport and, build the togetherness that we can't have when we're, not at work. And obviously, trying to figure out how meeting cadence works. You don't want to be in 8 hours of meetings all day. So you try to, use chat where you can, not have to be in an hour-long meeting because, I'm just staring at a camera all day again. Has that been a lot of what you're saying, or, do you end up with a lot of meetings because of just who your position?
Yeah, my days are full of meetings. That's the short answer. There are always opportunities to adjust the schedule, though. I would really push back on anybody who says, well, my day is full of meetings and I don't really have any choice about that. I have rarely found that to be the case. I suppose it's possible, but in general, my experience has been for both people who work on my team, and or folks I work with, there are opportunities to move things around, and there are opportunities to make choices about what is important and what is less important. Not necessarily what is urgent, right? Usually that's handed to us, but what is important and what is not important. And so I would encourage that's the approach and philosophy. And that's largely what I've tried to do and try to bring in. It's harder to do in a new company because they're getting to know me just like I'm getting to know them, the collective they.
Right.
But yeah, it can be done. Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Mr. Betcher, did you have any questions?
Well, I like to touch on Phil's plan for the first 30 days. And I see a lot of when new people come in, some of them have these ideas like the first 2 or 3 days, why are you doing XYZ? Why don't you do ABC? And they have all these fancy ideas, but they haven't really embraced and kind of had those conversations like you talked about, Phil, and get to know your team, the people in the company and everything before they start making all these recommendations, right? And I even told my daughter this. She's a freshman in high school, and she's told me she joined the business and finance club right after school. And I'm like, what do you do? And she said, well, I don't know. They do make sure the Coke machines are stocked or whatever. So and I'm thinking, okay, there's some opportunity here for you, but don't go in there and have all these ideas and disrupt the whole group. Right. So I think that was valuable. I guess I don't really have a question, Phil, but if you want to, do you have any examples of?
Well, yeah. So the first very resonant example is I was tempted in every conversation to say something like that. Oh, well, what about this tool? Or what about that thing? Or have we tried this approach before? What about that other approach? And not like a genuine question, more like a leading question, like, are we sure we haven't done this thing? So it is a very strong temptation for I think any professional with some experience. And I want to recognize that it's that what I described or what I talked about as an approach, it's not an easy one. I think in particular in security, right? Because we're always looking for gaps or improvement opportunities because of, not just because it's going to make the company more money, but because we genuinely believe it's going to reduce some sort of risk for the company, which we think is potentially a critical one or something. I don't want to necessarily make too many assumptions, but I think that's the approach that most of the folks of us are using, because it's mine and it's the one that I've seen other people take that are in our profession. My caution is that and this is what helped to temper my own thinking in those kinds of conversations and meetings, and that is, Phil, remember that these folks are also intelligent, just like you. They're also thoughtful, just like you. They've also had opportunity to think about this program and make decisions. And unlike you, they've been around here a lot longer, and they have the whole context of history and the progress. Now, that should not prevent me from using kind of a friend cautioned me to use the Socratic method. So I'll use that example here to say that if you're not familiar, that this concept of kind of asking questions to get at, I'm grossly over simplifying Socrates' method, but the idea is asking questions to have someone explain the reasoning and the thinking that has been used to come to the conclusion or the decision or the rationale that we have today. And there's value in that approach. Like I strongly believe that is the way it can be done most effectively. That doesn't mean, however, that the person answering those questions or that the organization has made the most effective or the best decision. It just means they've made a decision. And so understanding that whole progress, that whole process of that decision, whatever it was, even kind of the random, I don't know any better here, so we'll do this thing. That is a decision. It's just, it may not be the most effective or the best decision. And so understanding that whole process before you make any changes, or that whole background and the rationale before any changes, that's what's critical. Because just coming in to say, with the benefit of my experience, I, Phil Beyer, dictate and say this is the best way to do it for Etsy, when I don't know anything about Etsy, or I know very, very little. I may have the benefit of experience and working with other teams and people, but that still doesn't mean that I have the context and the background of the existing decision or of the company. And so without all of those things, experience and knowledge and background and context, you can't make an effective decision. And you just don't have those last two until you start talking to people.
Right. Bryan, you're going to have to completely start over.
Yeah, we'll fix that in post. I'm muted again. I usually just let it go, but I had some background noise. So my wife, who I love, is a Uber director now at a very large company, and one of the things she has that I overhear during meetings that she touts is, don't put a box, and from InfoSec purpose, we tend to see a problem, fix a problem, throw a box in to solve a problem in this case, when in fact the process needs to be created before you put the solution into place, and whatever blinky box you get needs to work with the process, not the other way around. You see a lot of, we bought a tool, now let's create a process, and it's like, okay, the tool's not what we need. We didn't take into account all the stakeholders. We didn't, gather all the requirements necessary. We just picked what looked good, and then it's like now 6 months later, our focus has shifted and adjusted, and this tool does not do what it does. I saw this in the Navy a lot. It's like, we bought this thing and we only use it for 20% of its utilization. The other 80% of the items or whatever capacity or whatever it does goes by the wayside. And it, waste of money, time, and effort. We could just use what we have already and not have to, save a lot of money and time. So one of the things that I, as a manager, and previously even with the podcast here, is I've tried to create process instead of just throwing something at it. It's hard. It really is, because it's like you're in a meeting and, like Phil said, he's like, "Oh, why don't you do it?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm not the one implementing it. I don't know. I can suggest things when suggestion time is there, but then it's like I should just be chronicling what's going on and then deciding that later on, because I'm not the stakeholder. I'd be the PM. I'm going to be managing the implementation, not doing the implementation anymore. So it's interesting to divest myself from that particular way of thinking. It's been a long time, and I still have that issue. It's like, somebody's like, "Oh yeah, well, as long as you don't do X," and I'm like, I'm not going to be doing X. I'm going to be managing the implementation. You're going to be part of the implementation team. I'm just the person making sure that all the ducks are in the row so that implementation goes well. I don't have a solution. I'm just making sure the solution makes sense. So it's rough. It is so difficult, but yeah. Phil, I think we've taken up much of your valuable time. I would say this is probably what, a $2,000 meeting between all of us here.
No comment. I think that I'm hopeful that the time is valuable for the listeners,
yes.
and it's, one thing I don't get a lot of chance to tell people, because it sounds a little self-aggrandizing, so I'll be careful about the way I say this, but it's really important to me to help and to serve and to give back, and I've tried to find ways to do that in my career. I would absolutely encourage everyone listening to make that a part of your career going forward, if it's not already a core part, and that might just play out as it might play out as volunteering and something completely different, but there's real value and satisfaction and fulfillment from service, and from sharing what we know, and sharing the things that we've been blessed with other people. I like to think that that's my approach as a leader as well. So not just with peers outside of my organization, but also within my organization. So it's what I'm trying to say is, it's my absolute honor and really pleasure to be able to be here with you. And so I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk to everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know a lot of big companies don't necessarily want people coming on podcasts immediately. They had to go through all the marketing and the learning how to talk to media thing. But I do appreciate you coming and taking the time to come and speak. So Etsy is a big company. Do you have any, if somebody's looking for a job, what is the what's the process? What are you looking for in terms of security people, or incident response people, or what have you at your organization?
Good. I'm glad you gave me that chance. I almost forgot to make a plug here. We have at least one open position as of the time of recording, and maybe another one within security. There are certainly many open positions at Etsy. Etsy is hiring right now. In general, for those who haven't been keeping track, Etsy as a company has grown during the pandemic and not shrunk. So right. That's the reasoning. Within security, I have a privacy engineering manager that I'm trying to hire, and that's been a difficult position for us to fill. So if there's somebody out there who is very much interested in managing a team of talented engineers, who is skilled at engineering themselves, software development is what I'm kind of thinking in terms of background, and then also is looking for experience in privacy, that is the profile that we're looking for. So we have a posted position on that team for the manager of that position, or the manager of that team. We've also got a position we're going to post very soon on the same team that's a senior engineer on the team. So a contributor as well as a manager, with effectively the same profile, just one manager and one contributor. We're also probably going to post before the end of October a senior engineer position, or senior kind of leader position on the security team, a contributor as well, just a senior level engineer position. So keep an eye out for those things. Would love it if audience members reached out and applied, and let me know. For those of you who have made contact with me before, would love to hear that you're interested, and would love to follow up with you in that, and learn why, and learn more about what you're looking for and what you're looking to do. And then for those of you who could make recommendations as to who can fill those positions, or referrals, by all means, I encourage that as well. We're absolutely looking for talented folks, and would love to work with you if that's you.
Fantastic. Okay. Mr. Betcher, do you have any final thoughts?
Nope.
Cool. All right. Well, again, thank you, Phil. If like I told Katie, and it doesn't mean any, there's no facetiousness here. If you have any other comments or anything you'd love to come on and talk about topic-wise, we don't want it to be another 4 years before we get you back on again. So we definitely would love to have you on. We value your experience as a leader, as a proven leader, obviously, because you've reached the pinnacle right now. I mean, unless you want to be a CEO, you want to be a CEO. Does that work for you? Do you want to be a CEO?
We'll talk about that next time.
Okay. All right. So yeah, thank you again for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Phil.
That was our show for this week. You can find show notes for this and all of our shows at www.breakingsecurity.com. You can also find an RSS link on the site to add to your favorite podcatcher. You can find all of us on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can follow me on Twitter at Bryan Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Slack. Come join us on our Slack. A lot of great things going on there, a lot of channels of various InfoSec-related subjects. You can get an invite on Twitter by emailing our official Twitter handle for the show at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, or you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary assistance by offsetting costs involved in putting out a weekly show. Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase, renewal, equipment upgrades, time and effort building the community we have. We appreciate all of your help and support. If you'd like a t-shirt, stickers, coffee mug, or just to show your support for the show, you can check out our TPub site, www.tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast. We thrive on your feedback. A quick 5-star comment on iTunes or Google Play Store or your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Pandora, what have you, go a long way to gaining us additional visibility. It takes no time at all, and we appreciate your help in spreading the word. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be safe, be well, be kind to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.